What is this? Sargon of Akkad is talking about Rich Evans from Red Letter Media? Don't these fools know you're not supposed to cross the streams? Well, hey Internet, it's your old pal King Waspervations here, YouTube's one and only channel that is actually positive about Star Trek. At least the only one that's positive about it that doesn't have corporate sponsorship of some sort. Let's be real here. So of course, Star Trek Picard premiere about a week ago. We all know this. I myself put out a review video, and it's actually been one of the better videos I've put out in a while in terms of views and comments and all that kind of stuff. So hooray for me. I guess this is me trying to continue to capitalize on that. And I guess having to make myself find some way to step up and take on the role that has now been made empty. Robert Meyer Burnett has failed us. The Prince of Positivity and all that jazz. Goes on his live stream, says he likes the first episode of Picard, and then proceeds for an hour to tear it to shreds. Obviously Midnight's Edge and Geeks and Gamers and Neurotic and Mecha Random and Anti-Trekker, they were never going to like Star Trek Picard from the get-go. And yeah, I'm really having a hard time thinking of anyone who's really seemed to enjoy the show or said anything good about it that doesn't have some sort of organization above them pulling their strings, like Screen Junkies and stuff like that. So why is it that I'm able to like this? Why is it that I'm able to see through the problems, the horrible problems of Star Trek, and still actually enjoy it and look forward to it and recommend it to people and tell them they should try to give it a chance? Am I just a giant retard with a top hat? Who knows? It's possible. I guess I should address I don't know, the 3 major complaints I've been hearing the most about the show, and kind of why I think they're a little off base. So let's begin, shall we? Okay, so I guess the first major, most common one, the lowest common denominator of complaints about this show, or basically about what CBS All Access and the Bad Robot, Secret Hideout era of Star Trek in general has been, is that it's dark, that it's lost sight of the vision of humanity that the Federation is supposed to be portraying. I don't think that's the case. The core concept that Star Trek is showing a united humanity in the face of various alien threats and conundrums and alliances and politics, it still seems to be intact in both Discovery and in Picard. They don't show, the Earth at war with itself. There's no interhuman racial conflict going on. Having the Federation be paranoid about Romulans coming in, yes, it's a very obvious allegory. I think really it's much a better allegory to Europe's immigration issues than it is necessarily to North America's immigration issues, but that's kind of another subject entirely. Or maybe not, but we'll get to I guess that'll be point 3. So much of Gene Roddenberry's ideals never really fully got manifested in Star Trek anyway. He didn't create it whole cloth entirely by himself in a vacuum. There's a whole lot of different writers and editors and studio execs and all sorts of people had a hand in pushing Star Trek around into becoming the thing that it became. The Next Generation is arguably the one that he had the most creative control over out of all the various series, and Picard is a very literal successor to that series in particular, obviously. But even then, The Next Generation, a lot of the portrayals of human civilization itself, sometimes, like, the people did often fall short of, you know, the lofty ideals that everyone held to. And that's always kind of been the case with humanity. You know, under various, you know, religious beliefs or under various political philosophies throughout history, you know, there's this presented ideal of what we're supposed to be, and then the actual people, like, never reach these ideals of things we make up. And so, whereas the idea of the Federation of Planets is a great ideal to strive for, and a value that our heroic main characters and crews of the various starships that the shows have showed us over the years, obviously they stand to uphold these deep core intrinsic values. But the standing for those values is more meaningful if there's actually some sort of contrast. And so the people are saying that, like, you know, the Federation is, like, getting too dark in this new post-Nemesis timeline that we're now starting to get a glimpse of how it's taking shape. And with what Season 3 of Discovery is supposed to be about, too. It's not that the critique that they're presenting the Federation as darker and on the verge of collapsing in on itself, it's not that that's inaccurate. My point is that that's okay. In terms of storytelling arcs, there's been enough series now where when you look at all the various Star Trek series, like, in total, there's kind of like a larger storyline going on, and a lot of it's been, you know, crawling up out of the, you know, the post World War III era and having first contact and humanity, you know, getting over its primitive problems and joining the galactic stage. And then later series, you know, becoming not so much decadent, but aloof and cold, having conflicts and wars. It's a natural story point. If they're going to be having, like, a redemptive arc in Discovery Season 3 of the Discovery in the future rebuilding the Federation, it's only natural to show the Federation's fall, and it's okay. Because you can't have a redemptive arc without going through a dark patch. Civilization has to be maintained. It can't just be assumed to carry forward with people not actually putting any effort to keep the wheels turning. And I don't know, like I said, like, the essential core idea that Star Trek is supposed to show, like, humanity, like, that has gotten over its racial and religious, ethnic conflicts. I don't see how any of these series have not, you know, honored that directive of sorts for what the show is supposed to be about. Being a little bit less episodic in terms of, like, you know, having their metaphors for modern day problems. They are being ham-fisted about it. They are being very ham-fisted about it. But as I say, I'm going to address that at point 3. But just, like, in terms of the first point, the Federation has always had a dark side. There's always been hints that, you know, things are not going to be perfect down the line. I guess there are some issues in Picard and how things are going that might conflict with stuff that was stated about, like, the 25th century back in Scott Bakula's Star Trek Enterprise, in terms of stuff that he learned through all of his involvement with the Temporal Cold War. But there's nothing to say that, like, those versions of the future, like, weren't erased by Archer's own deeds in the course of that series. Because that's the whole thing about, you know, the future being fluid. And I guess we should just really be lucky that all they did was just attach this as much as they did to the Kelvin timeline by having it take place after the supernova that sent Spock and that Romulan mining ship back in time. Because, like, they could easily have just, like, owned up to it and had this entire series be taking place in a Star Trek future that has already been adjusted for that alternate timeline, and it takes place in the alternate reality. It's a slightly alternate Picard, a slightly alternate Data. glad we're not getting that. And speaking of data, I guess we'll move on to point number 2. So, another thing I've been hearing complaints about is the Blade Runner-ish overtones to some of the plot lines that we're starting to see be presented to us about the legacy of Lieutenant Commander Data and androids, which for some reason they are on this whole like synthetics kick. I guess it's the synthetics thing because we're going with this strange. There's reasons for it. There are reasons for it, and there are cynical reasons for it. But there's this trend in science fiction in the last 20 plus years of having flesh and blood robots, which does, I guess, go all the way back to the original Blade Runner, because the synthetics in that were made from physical body parts. They weren't like replicants in the sense that they were robots with servo motors and all that kind of stuff. They were built out of individually cloned body parts and were assembled like robots. And I guess there could be something similar like this going on with the synthetics in Star Trek, and that's okay. Is it super original? No, but since when has Star Trek been original? Like it's constantly pulling stuff from Data himself, all the stuff with the positronic net. So much of Data's background lore is just ripped off of Isaac Asimov. And so to say that like all this stuff with fractal computer programming to be able to recreate a neural net and all that doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me in the least. All stories are derivative. Star Trek has never been terribly original. Most science fiction is not original anymore. Most of the time, for years now, when I hear younger people like, oh, I just heard about this new thing, blah blah blah, and here's its premise, and I'm like, that sounds an awful lot like a Larry Niven story from the 60s, or that sounds an awful lot like an old Poul Anderson book, or that sounds an awful lot like something Arthur C. Clarke already wrote. There's really, there's not much new under the sun. Even in terms of actual science, and not even science fiction, like a lot of the programming and stuff that's being shown, like, oh, these new discoveries in quantum physics, go back decades, since they were originally thought up of and being argued about until they finally got a little mainstream appeal or interest, so that some people at the Science Channel decided to make a 45-minute docudrama about it. Unrealistic. The idea, like people complaining about the mushroom drive and Discovery and stuff. It's no more or less fantastical and stupid and unrealistic than the concept of a time warp drive, which is one of the fundamental things that Star Trek, operates under in terms of a conceit in order for the show and the setting to function. Transporters are nonsensical, godlike technology. There's a lot of tech in Star Trek that is probably outside of the physical realms of things that can actually be done with machines. It's all well and good that on paper, we could maybe we could open a wormhole and we could put energy into it, but exactly what is the physical mechanism that's going to grab onto and do any of that is kind of more the issue. And so it's all well and good that on math, maybe we could come up with some sort of distortion warp drive that'll warp the space around a ship so it can slip through space technically faster than light. It takes the power requirements of an entire galaxy's worth of stars. What kind of engine are you going to put in that thing? Star Trek is all based on fantastical ideas. Barely thought out through and retro-engineered in the aftermath by the fans themselves to make it work for their own headcanon. That's always been the case, and it's going to continue to be the case. With franchises like Star Wars, Firefly, Babylon 5 had a lot of that, and Star Trek will continue to do so. So just chill out. The thing with the androids and having the androids be like flesh and blood people is a trend that it bothered me when Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, did it. As great as Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica was, to me, it's not innovative storytelling or mystery and intrigue to have your androids be completely indistinguishable from flesh and blood people. It's a way to cut expenses. Having human Cylons in Battlestar Galactica was a way for them to have Cylons in every episode of the series without having to spend the money on the CGI or physical props needed to portray robot Cylons all the time. And I guess in a way, by having Daj and her twin sister just look like normal everyday humans, saves that poor actress from having to sit in a chair for 20 hours every morning, having a bunch of prosthetics and white makeup plastered all over her and stuff. Or saves them from having to have CGI robots or any of that. It's a cost-cutting device. And that's probably why, as a trope, it's becoming a little overused in science fiction as of late. But it's nothing unique to Star Trek. It's nothing that they're doing that's out of bounds. Is Picard kind of full of a lot of Firefly motifs and tropes? Yeah, there's quite a few of them. So what? Do you know how many episodes of Star Trek there have been already, if you combine all the series together? Google it, find out. What stories are they going to be telling set in a science fiction universe that are understandable to a common audience, that are not going to seem like a ripoff of something? My own personal idea and pitch for a Star Trek series I came up with years ago is, well, unfortunately, really similar to Stargate Atlantis, even though I came up with it before I had ever heard of Stargate Atlantis. There's just only so many options of what you can do. So, it's fine. It's fine. I swear it. Anyway, so I guess point 3 then. In some ways, the current environment and fandom for a lot of different fandoms, not just Star Trek, I would lay at the feet of 2 primary villains. Online YouTube movie critic punditry, and the pretentious actors and producers of some of these shows. John Campea, quite unintentionally, might have ruined fandom with his whole thing of creating shows whose vibe is to kind of create an ESPN of movie news. It's fun, it's popular, lots of people have picked up the format. I've been watching his stuff for almost a decade now. But the thing is, what I don't think anyone ever thought about, and certainly not John, I don't blame him or think he would have ever done this on purpose, but by creating kind of an ESPN sports analysis kind of attitude about all these things, I think it might have fostered this odd sense of competition between the 2 factions. The way that you, like, Group A needs certain movies to fail and or succeed so that Group B can't claim them as a trophy, kind of a thing. And so in this era of severe political divisions, we have created an atmosphere of competition around various fan-beloved properties, and then throw into the mix of that what I mean about the second villains, the pretentious actors and producers of these various shows, who feel like they have to open their traps and make statements about how, oh, this is a great analogy about how living in the Trump administration. And don't you know that the Klingons are really a message about the MAGA crowd and Trump supporters. And T'Kuvma from Star Trek Discovery is Donald Trump. And in Picard, you know, the Romulan refugees, they're really an analogy about Mexicans, and that's why we portray them doing housework, and because we want to show how racist Trump supporters are. And we're going to even have a Trump analogy in Star Trek Picard in the form of the evil android scientist Dr. Maddox from. Do you remember Measure of a Man? He's that mean Star Trek scientist, and he's going to be our Donald Trump. Okay, all that's bullshit. When they say shit like that, they're full of shit. They're posturing. Watching these shows, not thinking about that at all. I just rewatched this first 2 seasons of Discovery at work over the last several days. The T'Kuvma as Trump makes no sense. No sense at all. The Klingons as MAGA people makes no sense. That's this weird cartoon Like, basically, I think too much of it's just kind of all based off this cartoon that popped into some people's heads over what the news told them about that Charlottesville incident. And Maddox, the android designer who is trying to recreate Dr. Noonien Soon's work, having him be Trump? Really? A super scientist is Trump? You know, the best character that they could have used as an analogy for Trump and Discovery would have been Harry Mudd. He would have been a good person to have as a villain to critique the Trump administration. But no, a super scientist who designs robots. Yeah, that reminds me of that time that Donald Trump did super science stuff. Oh, and like secretly engineer a false flag 9/11 attack on Mars. That's totally stuff that... See, these are not analogies for what they say they are. But because they're telling people they are, it's framing both these two camps into taking positions about these shows that are inaccurate. They're coming in with all their perceptions colored by all this baggage. That's not really there. And so I don't think the actors are able to really view their own work accurately. The people making it aren't viewing it accurately. The people watching it aren't viewing it accurately. Maybe I'm not either. I was more critical of Discovery until real recently. I was more critical of Star Wars until recently. Several months ago, my mom passed, and for some weird reason, it's allowed me to enjoy things that I've become very cynical about in recent years. And so I guess my recommendation to you would be let your moms die so that you can have... Well, obviously that's not going to work. So really, there's no way for me to translate this mind frame that's suddenly come upon me. But I think we're overdoing the nitpicky stuff. I guess to you as viewers, you're probably not yourself responsible unless you just happen to be running a channel or something and watching this. But so many YouTubers and the critique sphere have a brand to maintain. And so how much of their enjoyment of stuff is being ruined by the fact that they have to be casting such a critical eye on things? And how much is the casual audience's enjoyment of these products colored by the fact that we're inundated with all these YouTube opinions constantly telling us why this is bad. It's bad, it's bad. Oh my God, look at this thing that happens in the plot. Look at this other thing that happens in the plot. I'm not even sure like half the time what these channels are actually critiquing. Like there's a common thing I find weird about YouTube reviews where like a lot of channels basically just sit there for 12 minutes and describe point for point what the plot is. And I don't really know if that's... I guess a technicality you can call that a review because you're reviewing the material, but I don't really think that's what film review is supposed to be. To me, it's a cheap way of basically piggybacking off of another person's product almost in a way. It is almost like copyright theft, even without using any of the footage or audio or music or any of the stuff that would normally, cause a copyright strike on this platform. Because what you're doing is you're presenting the entire storyline, all the plot leaks, all the Easter eggs. You're letting out the whole kit and caboodle in an entertaining fashion, often with pictures and moving stuff and little cartoon versions of yourself in front of it, a la Dave Cullen and others. And you're basically taking the potential for people to have gone out and just watched this themselves away because you've let them watch it, because you've told them about it. They don't need to see it. There's a lot of people who have really strong opinions on a lot of things who've never actually watched them because they're fans of YouTubers. YouTube is a social media site. I know YouTube doesn't want to think that of itself. It wants to be a television network. It wants to be a streaming site. But unfortunately, it still is a social media site. It's not the same kind of social media site as Facebook. Especially in the fact that, like, on Facebook, you're not constantly having people in your Facebook friends be like, hey, you like seeing my posts on Facebook every day? Well, chip in $5 a month on my Patreon, so I'll have time to sit around on my ass and type on Facebook. And yet that kind of shit's a career model for people on YouTube. And, YouTube never should have monetized in the first place. That's kind of what changed everything. As soon as people started being able to make money off what they do, they kind of have to develop a shtick, and then they have to stick to it, because once you have an audience for doing a certain kind of thing, you risk losing them all and risk losing your income and having to go back to your gas station job if you change your mind on anything or present yourself in a different way. So the critical drinker always has to be drunk and critical. Red letter media always has to be doing the Mr. Plinkett thing. Even if they're not actually doing a Plinkett video. They always got to just be like, oh, this is so crappy. Red letter media, whose only positive Star Trek reviews have been for what? Star Trek Beyond and Star Trek 09. I mean, go back and watch. Those are the only two times that, Mike Stoklasa, Jay Ballman, and Chris Evans have ever had anything good to say about a Star Trek movie. So is it surprising that they don't like Picard? They didn't like Discovery? Are we supposed to be shocked? Is this a revelation? You know what's ruining your ability to enjoy the stuff that you used to like? You're spending more time watching people on YouTube talk about it, talk negatively about it. It's not even necessarily that their criticisms are wrong, but just the constant negative presentation makes it nearly impossible to see these things clearly. I mean, I myself had fallen quite susceptible to it, and it's just by some weird mental trick of my mom dying and making me just kind of like look around and realize how so much of the stuff I like is because of her input when I was a little kid, and sitting me in front of the TV and like, you're going to watch the Hobbit cartoons, sitting me in front of the TV, you're going to like Star Wars, you're going to like Star Trek, you're going to like Dune, you're going to like this, you're going to like that. That, like, after she's gone, it's hard to like interact with almost any of the fandoms I consider myself a part of without stirring memories of that. And thankfully, like, the initial turmoil and anguish over losing her is past to a point where I feel comfortable making YouTube videos again and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, it just really made me just like realize just this how like full of shit most of this stuff is. Like I said, I've been watching Discovery again for the last like 3 or 4 days at work. It's fine. It's totally fine. Like, all the Mary Sue stuff is stupid. Michael Burnham is very much set up to explain why she is the way she is. She's not a Mary Sue. She's way more developed and vulnerable a person than Rey in Star Wars is. That's a more valid argument there. And even then, so the fuck what? In the end, I guess all I can really just ask is take a moment and wonder, are you not liking something because it's actually bad and because you're not enjoying it? Or are you not liking it because people whose agendas align with your own have told you not to like it? Just food for thought.
God damn it, you fool! You forgot to tell them to hit like and subscribe for more quality content like this from King Waspinator. Well, when I feel like it. It's not like I'm getting paid for this,